Hello and welcome back to the Entertainment Vortex. Today we were at Brendan Theaters watching the worst titled film since The Edge of Tomorrow, The Rhythm Section. January release date, so obviously you know it's been put into the cemetery for films. Having seen it now, this is for a very good reason. This movie doesn't know what it wants to be most of the time. I feel like this film had a massive identity crisis between having this really dark, brooding character, a really depressing story, but then also not understanding how to not add like really weird upbeats to it. It has a half-decent score that kind of follows the film around, but when that score is taken away, they plug in a soundtrack, and that soundtrack has some really weird, upbeat, kind of like indie rock songs, and they just do not fit this film at all as far as the way that the story is being presented. So obviously some of the things that you're looking for when you come into this movie are the action sequences good. Some of them are good. It has this really big problem that happens with a lot of action films nowadays after things like the Bourne trilogy came out. You run into all this really nasty shaky cam, but because it doesn't have that same pedigree as something like the Bourne trilogy has, it doesn't really have a place. The action sequences don't feel as big and as grand and as over-the-top, like crazy fight scenes as that type of a film. So these fight scenes, they feel lackluster, and I think that that's part of the reason why they tried the shaky cam, was to make them feel more visceral, and it does not work. I will say, outside of those sequences, a lot of the cinematography works pretty well. There are some really cool shots, and it does take this almost like only first and second person kind of feel to it. You don't really get any sequences without Blake Lively's character in the room. It follows her character very, very closely. I do feel like this is a directing and a cinematography choice, and I kind of like it. It isn't something that I'm offended by, and in some moments it does work. It just does create some iffy places in the story, and you end up getting a lot of exposition and being told rather than shown things, especially in really big moments where if you were shown something, it might be a little bit of a twist of the knife, whereas when you're told it, it's just like, oh, cool, you just told me that you're doing another cliche. Because that's the biggest gripe I have with this film, is it is full of cliches. It seems like it's grasping for the greatness that is a bigger film or a bigger television series than this. We went and saw this with a couple of friends. There were some comparisons to things like Atomic Blonde and Hannah as far as like influences for this movie, but it reaches not even the shoes of either of those things. It is very low on the pole as far as like a strong female character-led action movie. That being said, Blake Lively is not bad in this film. She does what she can with a very choppy story, a very poorly written screenplay, a rough grasp of a British accent, but her actual performance, the physical acting component, she does a fairly decent job. I mean, she keeps up with all the other actors on screen, and she has good scenes. There are a couple of things where she has to reach out and use some really heavy emotion because, like I said, it is a very depressing story when you look at it from the grand scale of things. And she does those very well. This, like I said, directly connects to how poor that screenplay is, though. There is some very bad dialogue, and like I said, it pushes almost nothing into your viewpoint and goes strictly for your ears at all times. You're not really getting to see any of the story unfold. It's like you're being told a story almost narrated. Like there's no narration to the story, but it feels like you're being narrated to constantly. It's frustrating. It's really difficult to watch. There are a couple times where you think that you could just get up and walk away, and you could probably think of what the rest of the story would be. And based on what we saw all the way to the end of the film, I wouldn't have been far off. I think the biggest issue that I had with this movie is, for being an action movie, it's just boring. And that's just about the worst thing an action movie can be, is boring. It's really tough. Like I said, the cinematography is good in some places and really bad in others. The acting performances are fairly solid in some places and really rough in others. The story has interesting concepts that it works with, but it ties them all together with these really cliche plot beats. It just isn't very fun. There are some places in this movie where it tries its hardest to be fun, but because the story is so depressing, I think I would have enjoyed this movie more if they would have just leaned more into that motif. Overall, I'll say that I would give this movie a 5 out of 10. It's pretty rough. Go watch The Gentleman instead.
If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We give you multiple videos every single week. And we have t-shirts available if you're interested in those as well. Those are available down in the description below. We hope you'll follow us into the vortex. We'll see you next time.